And the iTunes review of the week comes from Rico Caveglia. And Rico says, I love Chris's title and subject. One of the biggest challenges we have as humanity is lack of expectation of what's possible. All of his podcasts are exactly about how to become your best possible self, because that's why you are here and because you can. Great stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rico. Thank you for that review. And if you want to leave us a review, give us feedback, you can absolutely do that. You just go to beyourgps.com/iTunes and you can submit a review there, or search Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self on iTunes and you'll find us like that as well. So we appreciate you doing that. Thanks in advance for the feedback, for what's working, for what's not working, so we can improve and be our greatest possible self together. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, the intro of this incredible human being, Dr. Saundra Dalton Smith, is a board-certified internal medicine physician and has an active medical practice near Birmingham, Alabama. She is an international media resource on the mind, body, spirit connection, and featured in Prevention, MSNBC, Women's Day, Red Book, First for Women, and numerous other media outlets. Dr. Saundra is also an award-winning author, and her newest release is Sacred Rest: Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, and Restore Your Sanity. Oh my God, what an amazing title, and especially in this day of everyone's so exhausted and burnt out and just overwhelmed. I knew that for our audience, for you out there listening or watching, Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self, understanding the science of how we rest and what that really means, both physically and energetically and spiritually, is super important for all of us. So I'm excited to have Dr. Saundra Dalton Smith on the show. How are you doing today? Welcome to the show, Doctor.
Hi, Chris. I'm great. How are you?
I'm so wonderful. Thank you so much for being on today. We appreciate you coming on to share your wisdom and your experience with us and our audience. So thank you so much.
Happy to do it.
Awesome. So we're going to dive right into the theme of the day, which is today, what would it be like if? So this possibility kind of statement of what would it be like? What's possible? And how does that impact you today, Saundra? How has it impacted your journey?
Well, for me, when I think about that question, what I think about is about 5 years ago when I was completely burned out, and I thought about what would it be like if I enjoyed my life.
Yes.
I enjoyed this career that I had spent so many years building, and all the goals that I wanted to meet and all these things, because sometimes once we reach those goals and we have all those things we said we wanted, when it doesn't meet our expectations, then it's like, now what? And so I want to know, what would it be like to truly enjoy my life, feel well rested, energized, passionate about the things that I do, and not feel like the work I was doing was just draining me, but actually reviving my life.
Wow. So you got to this place of like, I don't want to keep going through this situation. Like it was a tunnel to a new future, like a possibility, a doorway, a window to a new future that you actually got to connect with.
Yeah, it took me on a journey to try to determine, how do I revive, was the word that came to mind. Revive the parts of my life that seemed like they had just become depleted and dead.
Wow, that's powerful. So powerful. I love it, Saundra. So this is a great start to the interview. And for anyone who doesn't yet know more about you, let's fill them in and give them the 411 about who is Dr. Saundra Dalton Smith.
I'm an internal medicine physician, as you mentioned. I spend a lot of time teaching people about wellness and about being able to live their best life. That's actually the name of my website. Yes. I Choose My Best Life.
Yes.
Learning the small steps, really the choices that we make that create the life that we're living. And so a lot of that is done through speaking or writing. And I just really love having a chance to go beyond just the physical. My medical education, obviously, and my training is treating the body. But what I find is you can't treat the body without treating the mind and the spirit and all of the other parts that make us, if you really want to have people live their best life.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, I totally agree that it's not just the surface thing. So many people are stuck with the surface conditions, surface results, surface reaction. But it's really when we get to that deeper level, that root level, which ends up being in the mind or in the spirit or whatever else it might be, then that's where we can actually start making the difference and making the progress. So I love that you go there and that's what you're focusing on. And I love that you're talking about your best you and all that because greatest possible self. Like we love that. We love that conversation. So
Absolutely.
Sandra, yeah, go ahead. You do too? Yeah. Cool. So let's go back. Let's go back into the journey about that moment where you turned everything around. You were looking for that revival in yourself and in your life. Tell us about that.
Well, I ended up hitting rock bottom. And I think sometimes that's where we end up going before we really realize that there needs to be a change. So I found myself literally on the floor in my house, just completely depleted. I was a young mom at the time, so I was working and taking care of the home and family and all of that, and had just come to the end of myself. And what happened was really on the outside, it looked very good to most people. I looked successful. I had all the things everybody would have thought that I would have wanted, and really all the things that I even thought I wanted. And when I got to that point and it wasn't really satisfying, it gave me a choice. Either I could kind of give up and give in, or I could figure out what needed to change and then start doing the steps to make that change. And so that was the journey that I ended up taking. And it really took me on a road of trying to learn, okay, if I'm tired all the time, what do I need to do to stop feeling that way?
Yes.
And like most people, I thought, okay, I'm just sleep deprived. So I'll try to make sure I get those 8 to 9 to 10 hours of sleep that everybody recommends. And even when I got that, I have patients tell me this all the time. Oh, well, I sleep fine, but I'm so tired all the time. I didn't believe it until it was kind of my own story. And that really had me looking at what makes us tired. What really does rest look like? And is rest and sleep the same thing? Which I found out they are not. They're components of each other, but they're not the same thing. Wow. And so that took me on really, my history is that of a biochemist. So biochemistry is what my major is in.
Wow.
So when I look at problems, I have a tendency to want to dissect them down to the smallest little molecule possible. And so that's what I did with rest. I started really looking at just the intrinsic parts of rest that so many people omit because they're looking at this big picture. How do I stop being tired? And they're not looking at the small changes they can make that can have huge impacts on their life.
Wow. Amazing. And I love that leverage perspective of small changes to make big impact. And I think that's the biggest thing is like just a couple tweaks to our nighttime routine, to how we approach sleeping, our and resting, and what that means to us can make all the difference. So along that journey, did you get any resistance to developing this curriculum, in yourself or the people around you, like to really mastering this?
Yeah, I think that was going to be that was probably the biggest challenge. And I knew that going into it. It was going to be a challenge even with myself because my whole mindset is one of an Enneagram 3 high achiever. I like to accomplish things. I like to see results. Yeah. And so with rest, I always had kind of looked at it as laziness, as kind of being for weak people. It wasn't what the high achievers do. And so that was something that really was a problem for me because I didn't want to go that route. I didn't want to see that as the answer. And then when I really started kind of taking a look at how other high achievers were managing their life, not just looking at what they had accomplished, but when reading about kind of just their day-to-day activities that they do, I saw that so many of them, that was such a huge part of their life. They just didn't make that the focus. So everyone was focusing on all this stuff they were producing, but they weren't really looking at the steps they were taking to be able to stay at that level of production. And that's really what sold it for me. And that's when I started really doing the deeper research, looking at other countries and going through specific high achievers and kind of looking at their life and how many hours do they sleep and what kind of things they do on their time off and their days off.
So tell us about some of the most fascinating or shocking statistics and research that you found along the journey.
I think one of the ones that really hit me was the number of people who are really just dissatisfied with their life. The key study that transformed how I even practice medicine was one that's done yearly, and they're constantly evaluating it, was to see how people deem their life in the next 5 years. And it asks the question is, do you feel like your life over the next 5 years, it will improve? It will stay static? Do you see that do you feel like it'll be struggling, like you're going this downward spiral? And over 55% of the people and these are Americans. Yeah. These are not like, third world countries who are thinking something catastrophic is going to happen. We're saying 55% felt like their life in 5 years would be struggling. And to me, that was just a desperate statistic. Wow. I was looking, and I actually quoted and linked to it on my website under the About Me section, because it so revolutionized how I looked at my role as a physician and as someone who wants to help other people be and live and do better. Because when you're looking at a 5-year goal, or if you're looking at your next 5 years, and all you can think is that this is going to be struggling, what is there to live for? There would automatically be an increase in depression and suicide and all these things, because it's going to take you down that downward spiral. And so it was that main statistic that started me looking at, well, how do we help people enjoy their life more? What is it about their life that they feel is overwhelming? And so that was a big part of it, because with the lack of rest and this kind of grind it out, keep striving type mentality, sometimes what ends up happening is it makes you so overwhelmed and so exhausted, you don't want to keep in the battle anymore.
Wow. It's so incredible. And I'm curious, because I'm more of a millennial side of the age spectrum. Did you find any interesting things in the age and what different people need? Do younger people need more sleep? Were you surprised, or less sleep? Were you surprised? What did you find with that?
Yeah. So when I did this research on rest, what I found was that there's actually 7 different types of rest that people need. And so just to kind of quickly mention what those 7 different types are to answer your question, they're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, sensory, and creative. And so you've got these 7 different types. And really, your depletion is what makes you have that tired, exhausted, overwhelmed feeling. And depending on which of the 7 you have the greatest depletion is where you're going to feel the biggest pull or drain on your life. Wow. So with millennials and even teens, what I'm finding is a lot of them have a huge disconnect with the social, the emotional, and the sensory aspect. Wow. And part of that, I think, is because there's this kind of pulling away from the face-to-face. And I love even Zoom and Skype and those kind of things. But what I find is they're more likely to do things like texting, where there is no face-to-face. You don't get the benefit of presence. You don't get someone gets you, or even with Facebook or Twitter or any of those, you're typing out a message. So you don't get the voice inflections. You don't really get a sense for what the other person is feeling. You can't tell if someone's on your side by just reading the post. So there's a lot of that where people feel disconnected. And even though they are connected in that they know what their friends are doing on a day-to-day basis, they don't feel connected as if people get them or that they're truly accepted, because they lose that extra bit of acceptance that comes from presence and from being able to see that someone is nodding in agreement or smiling, and just the different things that go with that.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. So these different types of rest, there's 7 different types. How did you know it was 7 and not 8 or not 6?
Well, that's the thing. I started pulling up a lot of the different research, and there's lots and lots of research on physical, which is divided up, which most people don't realize it's divided up into actually active and passive. So I started looking at that, because sleep is a passive type of physical rest. And then we have active physical rest, which like I said, is not very well discussed. But what I did was I combined some of the teaching from medical school, because medical school does go over the body very well. It just doesn't oftentimes break it down when describing it to patients. It kind of simplifies it, because it's almost like we're treating patients like they're stupid, and they're not. They are capable of getting the information. We just have to give it to them in a way that they can use it, because they don't want the level that their physician or their nurse practitioner learned it. They
Right.
need an actionable step so that
Yeah.
it's actually digestible and they can actually apply it. And
Hmm.
so that's what I started doing, looking at some of the teaching from that, some of the teaching from psychology, and all of these different studies, and kind of digesting it down into bite-sized pieces so that people can actually get it,
Hmm.
understand it, and then apply it to their life.
Beautiful, beautiful. So can we go into each of these 7 a little bit
Sure.
more in depth to talk about how to like really get a hold of them and know if we're
Hmm.
maybe lacking in these areas or excelling in these areas?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
One thing I would probably recommend everyone to do, because I think sometimes when you hear 7, it's like, oh my God, so there's 7 things I've got to do. It's like I'm already exhausted. I'm going to read this list. So one thing that I usually have my own patients do is I have a free assessment at restquiz.com, and I have them go take this free assessment that kind of spits out a result that lets them be able to see where they rank within the different of the 7 types of rest.
Hmm.
And then they can quickly see, okay, well, I'm not deficient in every one of them. These are the 2 that are the biggest deficit in my life. And you can kind of focus your attention specifically on the types of rest that are needed for you.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm super excited about this because I just want a side note, like a lot of people say I have a lot of great energy, and yes, I have a lot of great like physical energy and I'm charismatic and enthusiastic, but then there's times where I feel like, man, I'm just so exhausted and drained. So I'm definitely taking that quiz.
I think one of the biggest surprises, I guess, for most people was like you had mentioned about the difference between the passive and active type of physical rest, because yes, a third of the population is sleep deprived. That is one of the studies that's constantly going out. And so that's definitely a problem. And we have a huge number of people who are having to take, all the different sleep aids to try to help them be able to sleep better every night. And so we know that's an issue. So if you're not getting, at least 7 is the bare minimum that's recommended now. And honestly, that's person specific. Everybody doesn't need 8, 9, 7. It's what amount of sleep actually leaves your body feeling rested in a physical sense.
Right.
When you wake up in the morning. When you wake up in the morning immediately, you should have some sense of, I feel better. I feel revived, restored. If you're waking up and you're still feeling like, oh, here comes another day, then you probably didn't get restful sleep or high quality sleep. And so with that, when we look at, the sleep aspect of it, high quality sleep is when you feel like you slept well. It's when you're getting into that stage 3 and 4 of non-REM sleep, when the actual healing happens in the body and the neurons get regenerated and the muscle fibers get restored. That's the level of sleep that most of us want. And a lot of times you're not going to get that if you're having to take a medication, because the medication kind of plummets you instead of going through the normal cycles of normal sleep. So that's one thing. And so what I help people realize is that the active part of physical rest is just as important. If you're someone who sits at a desk all day, you may be, in a C-level position where you spend most of your time at the desk on the phone, you're not having to move a lot. That creates a stress in the body just because of the inactivity. Wow. And that inactivity requires restoration, it requires rest. And that can be as simple as what we call body fluidity, which is the practice of making sure your body is not staying in a static position for prolonged periods of time. That's where you hear people talk about standing desk, where they're, after so many minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, they'll set a timer or something where they stand, maybe go walk and get some water at the, at the break room or something, but some type of cyclic pattern where you are conscious of the fact that you should not be static in the same position for prolonged periods of time. And that really just helps the circulation, the lymphatics, all of those.
I have a question about that, because I sit for sometimes 4 hours at a time, because of this 12-hour marathon, right? So it's 4 hours break, 4 hours break, and then another 4 hours. I'm curious, if I am active and doing yoga and stretching on the other 6 days, is it something that is like still really detrimental, or as long as I'm making sure I'm taking proactive precautions and actions, then it should balance out really at least decently well? What are your thoughts?
That's a great question, because it's no different if someone's taking a flight, let's say, and they're going from East Coast to West Coast and they're on the plane for 5 hours and maybe not wanting to get up and go anywhere. So as long as your body's not already in a chronic deficit, it should recover from that fairly quickly. Now, that doesn't mean you won't feel the side effects of that.
Right.
Because the next day you might think, well, goodness, my neck is sore all of a sudden, or my legs are tight, because your body is going to revolt against that, because that's not the position it wants to be in, these static positions. And so, yes, you should be able to recover from it as long as it's not an ongoing thing. The problem is, for so many people, it's their day-to-day. It's their 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, that they're sitting at that desk. You know, they may get up to go to lunch. So it's 4 hours, get up to go for a 30-minute lunch, 4 hours. And so they're there for so long that what ends up happening is down the line, then we have people coming in with chronic neck and back pain, or coming in with chronic swelling in their legs. And all of those things are things that are going to make you feel more drained and tired, because your body's not happy. It's not in its kind of more restful, peaceful state.
Beautiful, beautiful. So what are the other types of rests that we need to know about, and how do we start taking new actions on those?
The next I would talk about would be mental rest. And I think that's one that a lot of people have problem with, is why they're not sleeping very well. If you are one of those people who you lay down at nighttime and then all of a sudden everything that's gone on during that day, you're having what I call the woulda, coulda, shoulda conversations, where you wish you'd said something different. So you're like replaying the whole conversation in your mind over and over again, with you saying what you wish you said.
Oh, man.
Or you're thinking about the next day. You're doing your to-do list for the next day. You know, don't forget to put lunch money in somebody's backpack or whatever. You're putting all of those thoughts in your head when you should be winding down. You're actually kind of running through your internal checklist. For those people, that's a mental rest deficit, because rather than process things throughout the day, the second their mind gets to a point of quiet, instead of shutting down, it's revving up, because it's like, it's my turn. Let me jump in right now get all this stuff out that I wanted to process along the way. And so for most people, if we should have times during the day when we're automatically doing that, because that's helpful to be able to process. If you are a list keeper, to go ahead and have those things listed out, put them on your calendar so that your brain doesn't have to hold on to it. But if it is right as you're going to bed, one of the simplest things to do is just what we call mind dumping. Just have a Post-it note or a piece of paper. If you're fancy, you can have a journal or something that you keep all this stuff in. But you basically just write down whatever it is that's popping up in your head. You don't process it. You don't analyze it. You don't try to critique it. You just write it down. And the benefit of that is the mind has a desire to protect us. And so when something's going round and around, it's ruminating in our thought process, the brain automatically says, this is important to this, so I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to hold on to it because I don't want to let him down. But when we write it down, it's as if the mind has permission to let it go, because it no longer fears that it's going to let you down by not retaining that bit of information. And so there's a freedom that comes with that helps promote deeper rest, because then your brain can get to a clearer, more peaceful state.
So for the people who are, let's say, falling asleep really quickly, does that mean that their mental rest is at a high level?
People who fall asleep quickly typically are well-rested people, because their body, their mind, and their spirit is not holding on to things that are fighting their ability to fall asleep. Now, sometimes you fall asleep out of pure exhaustion.
Right.
You're so exhausted, that you're just collapsing in the bed. But even those people who do that, they don't wake up feeling rested the next morning, because that level of exhaustion you can't recoup in just 8 to 10 hours. That's a deeper thing when someone just kind of collapses in the bed. But for people who are purposely laying down to go to sleep and their body's not hurting, they don't have any wound up tension anywhere that their mind is focusing on because they're uncomfortable. They don't have any thoughts that are going around in circles, and they feel at peace. They don't feel like they're fighting with themselves. Then yes, those people tend to have a higher level of rest, and they tend to score extremely well on the quiz in most areas.
That's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So what is the next area that we need to look at of rest?
The next one would be emotional rest. Emotional rest is really that ability to be authentic, to tell your truth and to say it without apology. And it deals a lot with the people-pleasing behaviors and kind of self-deprecating behaviors sometimes that we have when we have very weak personal boundaries.
Wow.
And so that's a huge issue I find with teens. I find that a lot of teens have a lot of emotional rest issues, And that's just because they don't feel like they can tell their truth. They don't want to, they want to save face with their friends, and they don't want to be upfront with their parents. So there's not that person really sometimes that they have where they can just truthfully say what's on their heart. And I find in my profession, we see a lot of this in suicide attempts, where, people are writing letters to family and friends and sharing their truth as they're trying to escape at that point, as they've come to truly the end of themselves. And at that time, and from my standpoint, as someone who's in the ER and the ICU when these teens come in, it's really distressing to hear the parents say, I had no idea. And they truly had no idea, because that hadn't been shared with them. And oftentimes their friends will say, we thought everything was okay. And that's because there is no time that person ever felt like they truly had emotional rest, where they could just say their truth and feel like people would love them regardless, even if they say something like, I hate my life.
Right.
You have to be able to get to that point where you can just say your truth, and then feel like there's some people that are in your life, and oftentimes it's just one or two that are on your side no matter what. Yeah. Thick or thin, good or bad, you can say it like it is, and then you can move on from them.
So is there a prompt that you would recommend, like some kind of question or inquiry, to be able to share either our emotional truth or to allow other people around us to share theirs?
I think one of the simplest questions, and the problem is we say it so often that we accept their lie, is, how are you doing? And then when we say that, there are people, the automatic reply is, I'm great, I'm fine, I'm busy, I'm tired. It's this really quick, like 2-word,
right.
comeback.
Right.
And then sometimes what I ask, particularly my patients, how are you really? Like, I want to know, how are you really? What, not beyond the fine, what's really going on in your life? Because I want you to articulate it. Don't give me an I fine. Articulate how you're doing. And when people have to think about that question, not just give the flippant reply, but think about it, it's a lot easier to come up with the truth. And honestly, as a physician, I'm not in the practice of counseling people like that. But when I ask that question, we go from a medical standpoint to really a counseling standpoint, because half the time tears start falling and I'm not even trying to, my nurse used to say, you have the Oprah effect. You start asking people these questions and they come out of the room just bawling. And it's like, I'm not trying to do that to them, but there is such a release in being able to tell your truth that it is freeing. And literally most people just start crying when they get that moment of being able to just say what's really on their heart.
Thank you. Thank you for providing that space for people, Sandra.
I think it's powerful. I think it's really, and it's something that anyone can do.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, it's always surprising to people when their friends or their loved one or their family members commit suicide. And a lot of times people always feel like they're to blame. Well, they're not to blame. We can't feel like we can take on other people's pain to the point that we're responsible for it. Right. But we can create room for them to have that emotional rest and to let them know that we see beyond that lie of I'm fine, I'm great, because no one's life can be summed up in those couple of words like that. It's just not realistic.
Wow. So beautiful. So that definitely helps us with the emotional rest aspect. What's the next type of rest?
The next type that's closely related to that is social rest. And that's what we were talking about earlier. That's where I see a lot of millennials, when they score themselves, are surprised that they score so poorly in social rest. And that's just the connectiveness, kind of that feeling of being truly connected, not distantly connected like through social media or texting, but that connective that comes through being face to face with people, that comfort level of being able to look at people in the eye. And I love that a lot of high schools and colleges now, that's something they are actually focusing on, is that when you're talking to people that you are having direct eye-to-eye contact, because what we're finding is that's becoming less common. Wow. People are more likely to look at your ear or the top of your shoulder rather than in your face.
What?
And the reason is because there's like a bit of intimidation that comes when you're staring someone face to face. There's a saying that the eyes are the window to the soul.
Right.
And some people have such soul pain or such soul discomfort that they don't want you looking into their eyes because they are afraid of what you might see when you look in them. And so it's teaching people that it's okay to be human. It's okay to feel things. It's okay that everything's not okay. That we can still have a shared humanity, even if we don't agree about religions, even if we don't agree about sexual orientations, even if we don't agree if cats or dogs are better. It doesn't really matter. We can still have kind of a shared respect for each other. And that's what that eye-to-eye contact does. And it creates this social rest because you feel like you belong no matter what.
Man, I love your communication style. It's just so pleasant, so real, so human, so just like flow. It's awesome, Sandra. I love talking to you. It's great.
I do love people. I think that's the thing. Doctors get a bad rap, I think sometimes because we're all kind of on that 15-minute clock. Get people in, get people out.
Yeah.
But I think there's the majority of physicians really enjoy people, and we really enjoy trying to make their life better. And some are skilled at doing it with the surgical scalpel. Others are skilled at doing it with communication. But I think that's the thing. When you love people, like I know you do, when you love people, it's very easy to want to communicate with them and to want to share with them and want to share whatever you've learned so that you can help whoever is coming behind you with the same story be able to see you can overcome, you can get through this. You don't have to be special. You don't have to have a medical degree. You've just got to get a hold of the tools and then apply them.
I know we have some more types of rest to go over. And before that, I hear legacy is important to you. And I just want to kind of take a little bit of a sidetrack and dive into that and why that's important to you and why, empowering our next generations is something that's at the forefront of your mind and being and how you show up in the world.
Yeah, that's a huge part of what I do. I like to go back into the medical schools and go back into the healthcare community and to help kind of the next generation of doctors see that we didn't get everything we needed just within those couple of years of medical school and residency, that there is so much more to treating the whole patient and that we really have to start looking at that. And even just within our own families, I think that it's so great to make sure that the offerings that we give the world, that they continue. They're like seeds planted in the ground. And so whenever you're giving into someone else's life, or whenever you're sharing a nugget of truth that you've learned, or even sharing your own story, you're giving a seed into someone else's life. And that seed is going to produce. And the more it produces, the more that is an extension of your own legacy. Because the thing is, we never know how our story or how our lives impact other people. There are some people that'll be watching this that you'll never hear about. They won't leave they won't leave a comment, they won't do any of that stuff, but they still have gotten the benefit from it. And that's part of legacy. It's laying down the seeds, regardless if you ever see the fruit. You are just content in knowing that you've put something good and deposited into someone else's life.
Wow. That's beautiful. I love it. So practical and beautiful. Have you been trained in this, Sandra? Have you been trained?
Trained in it? No. Trained in loving people? Probably, yeah. Had a lot of experience at learning how to love people.
Well, love people. And I think you said earlier about being able to communicate it in a way that they can take action on it, because a lot of physicians might have more of a intellectual, theoretical kind of speak, and you're like, hey, here's how it looks in your life. You're out there, planting seeds in your garden. What's going to happen when da 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 da, and you're able to really create awesome analogies and pictures in people's minds. So you are phenomenal. Love it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So what are the other types of rest that we need to take on?
Some of the other ones, one of them is spiritual. That one's probably a lot easier for most people to understand. The physical, mental, and spiritual are the three that most people have heard of even before we got here. So the spiritual rest, for me, what it looks like is having a relationship with the holy. And it's not just religion, because religion gets all tangled up as far as, even if you are in a mainstream religion, it's like, which part of the mainstream religion are you with? So that gets really complicated. So for most people, what I try to get them to understand is you have got to understand that you did not just appear out of nowhere and you're not connected in any way to everything else that's going on in the world. And I think that's the easiest way for most people to start understanding it. I'm a Christian, but most of my patients come in from every type of background you can imagine. I have atheists, I have Buddhists, I have Muslims. All of these people come into my medical practice full well knowing what I believe. And it's because I can still respect them and treat them the same as anyone else that comes in my office and offer them the same teaching without being an affront to them. Because I don't think that helps any of us. I think the benefit is being able to help people see kind of how our lives are intertwined with each other and then growing from that. And then if someone asks me specifics about my faith, then I can share that. But it's done in a way that allows people to come into my door and not feel like I'm pushing them away. And I think that's the biggest part, is that religion is about loving people. It's about sharing love, and it's about being loved to others. And so I think when we focus more on that, it makes it a lot easier to then share our own particulars about our faith without causing other people to feel like you're alienating them.
So the spiritual rest is more of whatever the faith is, whatever that the energy that we have been imbued or endowed with. It's like, where did that come from? What is our source? You know, like
having that relationship with it, where you recognize it and you appreciate it, and you allow that to be a part of your story. It's not this, I don't need it, but allowing it to be a part of your story, understanding that it's a part of peace. It's a part of how we recognize and understand peace, and how we start that process of learning how to develop a more peaceful spiritual side.
Yeah, that was beautiful. And I totally relate to this because when I was in high school, I was rebelling against my parents and I resented them. And I say, go away. I don't need you. I got this on my own. And that also translated into everything that they valued and believed in, which was Christian. I was brought up Christian. And I said, I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. I don't need none of this, right? But that led to so many challenging times in my life, hitting, my rock bottom moment where I just felt like I'm doing something that's not working here. There's something that's not working in this. So for me, it's like when I had the ego get in the way of saying, I know better. I don't need any of this. I don't need anyone's help. Like I'm a self-made man, and like I'm the one who makes my destiny and stuff like that. Like it really just discounted all the amazing support that I'd received from my parents and God, the universe, source, creator, whatever we want to call it, or whatever the faith is. And I'm just like so grateful that I came from that place and I learned that lesson, and now I'm like, hey, just accepting everyone, whatever your beliefs are, like you do you. And I know for me, I'm fulfilled by spiritual wisdom, with spiritual energy, like whatever that is. Like I don't even have a name for it necessarily, but it's like, just that's something that fuels me, and I respect it and I honor it. And I think that's the biggest part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, because sometimes people will say, well, I don't believe what you believe. Right. And I tell them, I'm not trying to get you to believe what I believe, but I need you to believe something. Because you will never get to a point of being able to move forward until you believe something. Right. You have to believe something about a spiritual side to really start filling up that hole that will just get deeper unless you start acknowledging it.
Yeah, and it's like, I think it's almost like the universe attempts to teach people a lesson who think that they are the biggest thing in the universe and the most important, the center of the universe, right? Like karma or whatever we want to call it, like comes to teach us that lesson. And I'm just so grateful that we are in this era where we get to share about that, and there's an open conversation, open communication about it. It's amazing. Okay, beautiful. So that was the spiritual rest, and let's see. I think we've done five or six.
Yeah, there's two left. There's sensory and creative. Okay. And sensory rest well, let me put it this way. We all know we have the five senses, and the thing is, those senses are constantly being under attack every day, whether we think about it or not. If you're sitting in an office, you might have 6 employees that are working kind of around you, each wearing different cologne, perfume, deodorant, body lotion, hand lotion, whatever, all these different smells coming at you. On top of that, you probably have some kind of fluorescent lights that's going on. If you're using a computer, you've got that coming back at you. there's probably some type of background noise, whether it's the elevator music kind of thing playing in the background, or if it's just the hum of people talking. But there's constant activity going on in the senses. And so what we don't realize is that that has an effect on our body. That has an effect on how we feel. So people who are in very highly toxic sensory environments have a tendency to take that toxicity with them. For example, I have a friend who's a DJ, and he was commenting on how whenever he leaves, he would come home from his shifts. He'd do it like 3 or 4 days a week. He would come home from his shifts and just be like irate at his family. And he couldn't understand why. He's like, why am I so wound up and tense when I leave the station? And I'm like, what do you do when you leave? He's like, oh, well, I get in the car and I'm listening to the podcast or radios or whatever I do on my way home from the station. And I told him, I said, for the next 2 weeks, I want you to not listen to anything. Just let it be silent in the car. And he was like, but I'm a DJ. I like my sounds in the background. I'm like, I got you, but it's a 20-minute drive. It won't kill you to have silence for 20 minutes. And I remember getting the phone call back, and he was like, I can't believe how something so simple has has allowed me really to have so much peace. Wow. He says, because now all the stuff that I'm, rummaging around in my head when I get home that has me so mad, I can process it during that 20 minutes of silence, clear my thoughts, calm down, so that when I walk into my house, I'm not automatically lashing out at my wife and my kids because I'm so frustrated from my day. Wow. And I thought, we're talking 20 minutes of silence. It's something that he normally wouldn't do before he goes to bed. Everything wouldn't go off till right before he goes to sleep. So allowing that little bit of sensory rest allowed him to have the space he needed for his mind to clear, and really helped him with the mental rest part that he was having a problem with.
Wow. What an amazing example. And I love it. That was perfect. And I think what comes to my mind is this for sensory rest is when we get up in the morning and people just grab their phone and they start just like going text messages, notifications, boom, boom, boom. And then even like going into bed, they're falling asleep with their phone in their hands,
Absolutely.
No.
And that goes along with, some people have asked me, well, what about those of us who like to sleep with white noise in the background? I don't have a problem with white noise, but as long as you, at some point in your day, have some silence, because white noise is helpful for mental rest for people who can't seem to shut it off any other kind of way, because it directs the thoughts on that pattern. So that it's almost like meditation. Right. Your thoughts are focused on that pattern of sound, so that it's not focused on everything else. So I don't have a problem with that. I think it's very helpful for a lot of people because it focuses the brain. It's like sleepy time meditation to help you kind of go into that deeper level of sleep. Yeah. But I also think a lot of people probably do need to start looking at their electronic habits, like you said, particularly in the evening time, because it doesn't make sense to think you're going to watch some, high power shoot 'em up movie or something, flick it off, and then be able to go into a sound sleep. The brain doesn't work like that, where you can
I used to get like a ton of nightmares. I used to get a ton of nightmares when I would like watch scary movies. Now I don't even watch scary movies anymore. I'm like, why am I going to put this in my mind? I don't need this.
Yeah, because it's going to especially if you're trying to do that like right before going to sleep.
Right.
But even the news, a lot of people will say, well, I like to watch the 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock news. Well, if you're going to bed at 10:30, then watching that's the last thing your brain is holding on to. That's not healthy. That's not going to produce healthy results in the end.
No. And how have you found habits and like habitual things? How have you found habits linked with rest? I know we have one more, but I just wanted to check in with that.
Well, the habits are what I try to help people to start tweaking, because, when we think about rest and you're looking at all these different 7 types, I'm not talking about taking like some 24-hour or, 2-week sabbatical, because most of us can't pull that off. And I'm not talking about doing a vacation, because for most people, we return from our vacations even more tired than when we left to go on them in the first place. What I am talking about are lifestyle habit changes. So it's the small tweaks that we're doing, whether it be something like body fluidity we talked about earlier, or something like flow break cycles, where you're flowing for a while and then you purposely take a break before you start feeling tired and overwhelmed and fatigued. So it's just small things that you're doing throughout the day, turning off the radio on your commute home, these small things that you're doing throughout the day so that you're constantly building up a lifestyle of rest. So another thing, a lot of people deal with upper neck and back pain. And so, they may develop that, let's say in the first couple of hours of working. So rather than either stop and do a body fluidity motion that could be like a stretching exercise or something like that, rather than do that, what most people do is they just try to push through it. Whereas their body would actually feel better and they would actually stay in a more restful and productive state if they did like a self-massage, the two fingers pushed into the muscle, rotate the shoulder. And there's some very simple self-massage techniques you can do to unwind that tension immediately so that then you're actually more productive, because who wants to type out a report if you're hurting? You're going to just type out whatever because you're miserable. Whereas if your body's relaxed and feels good, you're more likely to have fresh, innovative, creative ideas because you're at your best.
Wow. That's powerful. Powerful. So we get that sensory rest. And what is the last type of rest?
The last type is the one that most people have not heard of. And it's one that's just now really getting a lot of the different studies that are coming out. And it's called creative rest. And I think one of my favorite studies is where it talks about where it was looking at the MRI results of patients as they looked at like bodies of water or greenery or like mountains and things like that. And what it found was that people actually, there's a change on the MRI of the brain when they're looking at these natural colors, natural scenes. And it was really interesting to me because how often do you hear people say, I feel so much calmer when I'm at the beach? Is there something magical about being at the beach? No, there is. Because what's magical about being at these places is that it actually does do something inside of us. It's creating an experience, and it's creating this sense of creative rest. And it's not just in the natural, like natural bodies of water or scenery like that, but it's things of beauty and awe. So people have mentioned a similar response, like when looking at the Grand Canyon or looking at large works of art, natural works of art. And they also have noted that the same thing can be seen in man-made art. So you may have had a friend or someone who's like really into music, and they go to a symphony or a play or theater, and they say, wow, that was like a spiritual experience. It was like so beautiful. It moved me. That is what creative rest is. It's not creating something, because that's creative work. That's work we're doing. Creative rest is that awakening of awe and wonder that comes when we are in the presence and experiencing something that has been creative, whether someone else is creating it and we're consuming it, or it's naturally created and we're consuming it. It's the consumption of art and beauty and wonder.
Wow. And you said they've been doing a ton of studies on this as well. Like, is there anything that stood out for you in these studies that you can remember?
Well, that was the main one that really hit me, was the one with the MRIs, because I think so often when we think about creative rest and that aspect of it, we think it's kind of like a foo-foo thing. It's like, I don't really have to deal with beauty. I'm okay with not ever going to, appreciate art or to appreciate those type of things. I'm not into those kind of things. But when we see that everyone has to have something that is inspiring to them. And so if you have gotten to the point of your life where nothing awakens you or creates a sense of awe and wonder, there's nothing that is so beautiful and inspiring to you that you would actually take time to relish it and to just enjoy it, then that's a miserable life. And so that in itself is a sign of that deficit in that area. Because once you kind of put a cap on that part of you, how are you going to ever be innovative? How are you ever going to get to the point of having new thoughts and kind of awaken yourself if nothing is stirring that? It's one thing where, like as an author, people talk about you're getting writer's block, or musicians kind of lose their groove, or artists lose their muse. What happens with that is because they're creating art. They're doing creative work, but they're not doing creative rest. And I think that's something that so many people who don't think that they are artists but their life requires a bit of art because they have to be innovative or trailblazers in their own career and in their own areas of work. That requires a level of creativity. So we really have to expand what we're talking about when we're talking about that awakening that creativity within us.
Wow, that's powerful. And when you're talking about that, I'm grateful because I do take the time to appreciate. And I was thinking in my head, well, what can I appreciate in terms of art? Well, everything. Everything is in some way, shape, or form an invention, a creation, an art. And it's all about how can we admire from a certain perspective. And even if you're driving on the freeway, and you're dead stopped in traffic, you can still take the second to say, isn't this beautiful that we've built a mass transit system that gets, millions of people around, or hundreds of millions or billions of people around, whatever we want to call it? Like, isn't this a beautiful thing? And isn't it amazing how, the tire mixed with the concrete and how it's like not the other way around? And look how, how just things unfolded and how people designed these things around us. And then we can look on the side of the road too and look at all the buildings and the plants and trees. And we can look into the sky and look at the wide blue expanse and be like, oh my gosh, like, isn't that a beautiful sky? So it's like total appreciation. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what object. That's great.
And I love that you're because you've completely got it. Because that's the thing. So often when we talk about appreciating beauty, people think we're talking about something very static. And it's not. Because I have had friends who are just, when we talk about creative rest, they will show me something that means absolutely nothing to me. I had one that came in with this rock or pebble or I don't even know what it was that they had found at the beach, and it had all these colors. And I'm just like, okay, that's a rock. That's cool. It meant nothing to me. And they were just enamored with it. Wow. And that's the thing. Your creative rest, no one has to love it but you. And I think that's the thing. Wow. It's because it's a restful state. And it's like with every type of rest, it's personalized. It doesn't require anyone else's permission, and it doesn't require anyone else to condone it. You have to be able to, in creative rest, understand what awakens that in you, what makes you go, wow, that's awesome. Or, that you just look at it with this new sense of just feeling like something has awakened inside of you. And that could be as simple as looking at a skyline. I've had it when I'm driving into a big city for the first time, and I've never seen their skyline. I'm like, wow, that's just amazing.
Yes. So beautiful. So beautiful. So, Sandra, let's begin recapping everything that we've covered, because we covered a lot of these amazing points and, the 7 different types of rest. So let's recap that, and then we'll bring it home.
Yeah, the 7 different types are physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, sensory, social, and creative. And like I said, if someone is like, well, which one do I need most? I would have them visit my restquiz.com. It's really simple, restquiz.com, and take the free assessment, because then they can identify which of the 7 types they're most deficient in, and then can start doing the process of reviving those specific areas.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Is there anywhere else that people can stay connected with you or continue their journey with you, and, what to be looking for coming out from you in the future?
Yeah, my main website is ichoosemybestlife.com, and there's a resources page there that has all sorts of free challenges and things that they can do. It also has a direct link to the quiz, and as well as the information for all of my books, including the latest one, Sacred Rest, Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your Sanity.
Awesome. Sandra, you are amazing. Thank you for showing up and delivering this wisdom to our audience. Thank you for showing up everywhere, on news, on TV, on your personal life, with your patients, just individually. Thank you for who you are for the world. It is amazing. I love what you're doing. I love how you're educating people to be their greatest possible self, so they can be fulfilled, happy, energized, and really create their best life ever.
Thank you, Chris. It's been great chatting with you.
Awesome. We'll see you soon, okay?
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.